Good morning to everyone, and I would like to welcome you to our virtual business roundtable, which we call the private sector as a reliable partner for economic recovery. We're happy to have our great speakers who have said yes to our invitation. We're happy with the nearly 300 participants that have registered. And we notice also even media, local and even foreign correspondents have signed up as of last night. So allow me to just share my thoughts before I turn it over to our chairman with regards to why we believe in Strat-based ADR Institute, the private sector, as the reliable partner for economic recovery. The past year, it's been a year. It's been a year since the pandemic has been declared, the global pandemic. It's been a year since our country has been locked down. And in Strat-based, we have tried to monitor these key issues that we consider as pandemic risks. But of course, from a private sector point of view, we continue to believe that this at times becomes an opportunity if you believe the nature of creative destruction. But in the Philippines, government data reflects things which are not good. We saw the 4 quarterly reports on our economy. We saw it being compared by our own government with our own ASEAN neighbors, and we have lagged behind. As you extract more from our neighbors in a broader perspective, you see it really reflecting not good news for our country. We've seen how, to be more specific, unemployment and underemployment continues to be a challenge since this time last year. And we hope that we can slowly recover because unemployment, underemployment gives rise to hunger. And as we track the most urgent concerns of Filipinos with our survey or polling partners, Pcci Research, we ended the year with concerns that is really focused on economic issues. True, there's the challenge of COVID, but the challenge of COVID has turned into or has brought about what I call economic consequences. And when you look at most urgent personal concerns of Filipinos, it refers to basic needs of people, but economic solutions can address this. If we can provide them with good jobs that can generate enough savings, that can allow them to overcome some of these social difficulties brought about by the pandemic, beyond the health challenges. And we were happy with the result of a survey that we did with Pulse Asia that saw that 85% of Filipinos across geographic area, across demographic area, social classes, agree that our government should not view things from a whole of government alone, but should see the private sector as a strong partner so that we can recover more quickly from this continuing health crisis that has brought about hard economic consequences. And to be more specific with this research, we took note of the role that Filipino public see in the private sector. That they're there to create jobs, they're there to expand livelihood opportunities. 6 out of 10 Filipinos believe that they can alleviate poverty, and at least 4 out of 10, even with a strong or an expanded public healthcare system, they see an opportunity for the private sector to help improve healthcare. That's why here in Strat-based ADR Institute, we continue to look at the private sector as the trusted and proven development partner of government. I would argue that 2020 was defined by the healthcare responses to the pandemic or the continuing health crisis. But as we have entered 2021, as we move to 2022, it will be defined by the economic response to its lasting damage and the collective effort of mitigating the socioeconomic impact of the COVID-19 crisis demonstrates the private sector's reliability as a government's partner towards economic recovery. I've long argued that this shared prosperity will be crucial in uplifting the lives of Filipinos, accelerating the country's economic momentum, and in helping rebuild the nation towards sustainable and resilient development. Moving forward, the social scientist in me, the researcher in me, believe that the private sector is key in creating a more sustainable and inclusive economic recovery, possibly through 8 strategic initiatives. The private sector can help address inequality, ensure livelihood by creating jobs. We have seen the importance of digital technology, so digital acceleration is key, and we need to reduce the digital divide. The reality that this pandemic can open their eyes also to climate change. Private sector can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, as we have said, the private sector, at least 4 out of 10 Filipinos believe that they can help strengthen our own health system. We need more public-private collaboration, especially in the infrastructure space, but driven by public interest also. Or even focus and advocate for stakeholder capitalism. We need to rethink and view things differently. We need to create access opportunity, quality education, and social protection for all Filipinos. Because at the end of the day, they will be the consumers of the private sector. And lastly, as we push for an entrepreneurial state or smart local government, I believe that the private sector can demand transparency and accountability in governance. We need to shape that environment. A few days back, I published a commentary in the business world whereby I spoke of the private sector is an effective and reliable partner during times of national emergency. The partnership between the sector and the government demonstrates how pandemic challenges can be transformed into opportunities to achieve recovery and shared prosperity. As I welcome all participants, as I thank in advance our speakers, I would like to turn to my chairman, our chairperson, Ambassador Albert Rosario, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Lindo, for your remarks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As we open this forum, our country continues to struggle amidst the turmoil of simultaneous and daunting difficulties of deep recession and persistent spread of COVID-19. Starting off as a public health outbreak in Wuhan, China, it quickly turned into a social and economic nightmare of global proportions. The Philippines experienced its worst economic fallout in 73 years, with a full-year economic contraction of 9.5% in 2020. That plunge was also the steepest recorded in Southeast Asia last year, despite the Philippines having one of the most impressive economic numbers prior to the pandemic. The official February inflation data of 4.7% and the BSP's own forecast of inflation rates going beyond their 2% to 4% target during the first half of the year warns of prolonged economic doldrums that will hit hard on the majority of our countrymen. The multiple multifaceted disruptions of 2020 left us with many difficult lessons. It taught us to urgently address the flaws in governance, health, and economic ecosystems. It taught us how to trust and heed the warnings revealed by scientific data. It taught us that the world is a living system of planetary linkages that are complex and synergistic. The biggest lesson is that we must maintain the balance of our health and the environment to sustain the economy, and the only way we can do this is if we work as a whole society. Fortunately, the tech savviness of Filipinos has proven to be a great asset, and I would say a great potential for our country. We're quickly shifting from predominantly face-to-face manual mode of interactions to a technology-empowered, digitalized system of communications and transactions. Public and private institutions public and private institutions can no longer cling to their old ways and must now step up their digital transformation to deliver their services and products efficiently and extensively. This reality is palpably evident in the surging volume of online transactions and demand for broadband services. New business concepts have also emerged. Mobility as a service has enabled people to get their groceries, medicines, food orders, and all sorts of goods without the need to get out of their homes. This has given new livelihood to workers who lost their jobs due to the pandemic. Business to consumer and business to business relationships can be facilitated with cloud-based technologies to ensure that supply chains and distribution networks are not disrupted. Financial service institutions have likewise responded to this digital shift, enabling any person with a smart device and access to mobile communications and the internet to remotely fulfill their financial transactions through various e-payment, e-banking, and e-commerce platforms. Developing secure business to government and citizens to government platforms integrated with real-time information management systems will eliminate the need for physical presence and the slow and archaic paper-based manual signature-heavy process in getting the necessary permits, payment of fees and taxes and other documents. This crisis has unveiled a transformative potential that is actually achievable with existing technologies. We now have an opportunity to overhaul the flawed structures of government bureaucracies to become a digitally revitalized ecosystem of efficient processes and well-managed resources. The governments of neighboring economies and other developing nations have long seen this and have been investing heavily in building strategic digital infrastructure to harness the benefits of a digitally enabled and connected population. Technology is a powerful tool, not just for communications and business processes, but just as important in managing the risks to the environment. This is a realm wherein nimbleness, innovation, expertise, and mobility of resources is needed, attributes that are native to the developmental spirit of the private sector. From what we see in social surveys, such as the one conducted by Pulse Asia in September of last year, there is undeniable public consensus that the government should engage more actively with the private sector to fast-track economic recovery. The private sector is seen as a driver of investments, creator of jobs, and primary source of livelihood. The general public looks at the private sector as an important partner of government in getting the recovery work done post-pandemic. Shared prosperity plays a crucial part in uplifting the lives of Filipinos. And this, my friends, is a mission that we must all unite and focus on if we are to recover the economic velocity before the pandemic. We're already seeing the private sector pushing for a more sustainable and inclusive economic recovery by incorporating environmental, social, and governance principles, which seek holistically positive and long-term returns for all sectors of society while taking care of the environment. These can also help attract the right foreign investments that could hasten recovery, stimulate innovation needed in the new normal, and to avert future risks. Our forum today, entitled "The Private Sector as the Reliable Partner for Economic Recovery," is the first of our quarterly series this year. We're indeed honored to be a part of this gathering of business and thought leaders to discuss the vital role of the private sector in economic recovery through public-private and partnerships, as well as their insights on the appropriate government policies that should be prioritized in the context of an evolving economic and political landscape. On behalf of Strat-based ADR Institute, led by its president, Professor Dindo Manhit, I'm delighted to welcome everyone to this Business Roundtable. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your joining us and for your most kind attention.
Thank you, Ambassador Albert, for your remarks. I would like to turn over to a good friend, Elizabeth Lee, or Beth, as we call her, who is our host and moderator for this morning. Beth, of course, is a trustee, a member of the Board of Trustee of the Philippine Trade Foundation. Beth?
Thank you, Dindo. Good morning to everyone. Our next speaker, I'm going to be introducing Mr. Ernest Bauer. He is the founder, president, and CEO of Bauer Group Asia, the premier strategic advisory firm working with the world's top companies across the Indo-Pacific region. Ernie will be talking about the prospects for Philippine businesses in the global supply chain. You have the floor, Ernie.
Beth, great to see you, and thanks for the introduction. Thank you, Ambassador Del Rosario and Dindo, for inviting me to join you today and for your great opening remarks. It's a real honor to be with all of you. So many friends in Manila, and I'm really sorry I can't be there with you in person right now. I hope I'll be able to come and visit you in Manila very soon, and I hope all of you will come to Washington and let me introduce you to some of the new Biden administration Asia leadership. I think you'd be very interested in meeting them. It's a bit of a more how shall we say, organized and professional team than we had for the last 4 years, and some good friends that some of you know pretty well. The topic of Philippine competitiveness is near and dear to my heart. I've been working with most of you for the last 3 decades and more on promoting investment and trade in the Philippines, not only with my home country, the United States, but with all of Asia as well. And so it's appropriate, I think, that our focus today is on the Philippine private sector. Philippine companies are among ASEAN's finest, and management of many top companies here in Manila is world-class. Your companies have led the way, even ahead of government efforts, significantly ahead of government efforts in providing pandemic response and relief, a model really for the rest of ASEAN and Asia. Philippine companies tend to invest in their people and communities. I know this because I know you and I know how your companies operate. And this has a critical impact on the economy and will help drive recovery. There's no greater force for economic dynamism in the Philippine economy than domestic investment by Filipino companies. Still, it is true that the Philippines is not as well represented as a regional and global investment destination as some of its ASEAN neighbors, despite some outstanding exceptions such as Jollibee, First Pacific, and Ayala Corporation, to name a few. Additionally, given the level of skill, human talent, outstanding geographic position, size and scale of economy, and its vast diaspora of Filipinos around the world, the Philippines is not yet a core player in global, as big a core player in global supply chains as it should be or could be. And I think there are many reasons for this, but I don't believe defining the problem is the focus of our agenda today. Instead, my understanding is we're here to talk about private sector's role in driving economic recovery. So let's take a look at the situation. In 2020, the Philippines experienced the worst economic downturn since World War II. The GDP shrunk 9.5%. Still, ever resilient, the Philippines is expected to return as a fast-growing economy with a strong bounce in 2021 and into 2022. The IMF's latest World Economic Outlook projected the Philippines' GDP would return to 6.6% in 2021, higher than the estimated ASEAN 5 growth of 5.2% and an average world growth of 5.5%. In 2020, Japan, the US, China, and Hong Kong were 4 major export destinations for the Philippines, respectively sharing about 15% share of total exports, valued at about $64 billion. In January 2021, over 84% of your exports, worth nearly $5 billion, went to APEC countries. To be sure, China is ahead of other markets as the primary source of your imports, contributing about 25% of the Philippines' total in the last year. Most of those imports are electrical products, mineral fuels, and machinery. The Philippines is highly dependent on its Asian neighbors, especially China, for intermediate export markets. And this reliance on the global value chain made the Philippines businesses particularly vulnerable to disruption of foreign supplies and orders during the pandemic's early stage last spring. The sharpest contradiction came in March 2020, where the Philippines saw a 25% decrease in product exports and a 26% drop in imports year on year. The pandemic shock has been a wake-up call for Philippine businesses to reflect on how to improve the resiliency and flexibility of their production, including increasing inventory capacities, diversifying supply chains, and adopting digital technologies, as Ambassador Del Rosario talked about. Companies will also lead the way here in the Philippines in understanding and adapting to global supply chain trends. This is really the hottest topic in C-suites of the world's top global companies. Supply chains are quickly shifting and adapting to new economic and geopolitical realities. And the fastest changing demands of not only consumers and customers, but government regulators who are demanding more accountability, transparency, and adherence to new standards in areas like the environment, social, and governance areas, or ESG. Management teams in Manila and around the country are delving into these new trends and requirements and trying to anticipate and adapt to a fast-changing landscape. Probably the most disruptive dynamic the Philippines, ASEAN, and Asia will face in the next decade is much more focused competition between the United States and China. That has not changed with the change of our administrations from Trump to Biden. This competition will be fierce, as we can see from the recent meeting in Alaska between top 2 officials from the United States, Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, and their Chinese counterparts. It will be competition, full-on competition, not only in economics and commercial space, but also in areas like technology, especially in digital-related technologies such as 5G, artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and related standards. In fact, on February 24th, President Biden signed an executive order instituting a broad 100-day reviews of supply chains in 4 areas: semiconductors, large capacity batteries, such as those used in EVs or electric vehicles, pharmaceuticals, and rare earth elements. In addition to these 100-day reviews, the executive order calls for 1-year reviews of sectors including defense, ICT, healthcare, energy, transportation, and agricultural commodities. The order outlined as a quote unquote whole of government approach to be coordinated by the Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, Jake Sullivan, and Assistant to the President for Economic Policy, Keith Hennessy. And it involves cabinet departments and consulting with outside stakeholders. The resulting reports will drive regulatory and legislative changes in the US and this will influence US partners such as Japan, Korea, India, the Philippines, Thailand, the rest of ASEAN, Australia, and New Zealand. The executive order marked a rare spot of bipartisan agreement in a bitterly divided Washington, reflecting the growing consensus among US policymakers that the US is overly dependent on fragile supply chains. While the order itself never explicitly mentions Asia in general, nor China in particular, it was clearly constructed with China in mind, as each of the 4 100-day review industries are especially dependent on China trade. Though the rhetoric selling the order focused on benefits for American consumers and potential job creation in our country, it left potential remedies unclear. The most likely outcomes of this effort and the reviews will be a push to accelerate both onshoring back to the US and reshoring to friendly countries in Asia. And this is an area where underlying an emphasis on the US-Philippine alliance, the economic aspects of that relationship will be very important. You should expect these new rules to focus on the perceived threat from China that is quickly spreading in the US. The new rules and standards will represent challenges for Philippine companies who want and need to do business with both China and the United States. So what can be done? Well, prior to the pandemic, the Philippines pursued a strategy of export-led growth and moving up in global value chains. In 2012, DTI launched the Industry Development Program to consolidate a national industry roadmap. Since 2016, under the Manufacturing Resurgence Program, or the MRP, multiple government agencies stepped up their efforts to provide better incentives, training, and other support for improving industry competitiveness. The MRP program set the target of establishing Philippines as a hub of auto, electronics, machinery, garments, and food production by 2025. And in 2016, 2017, DTI and the BOI conducted studies with USAID and Duke University in the United States to understand the Philippines' role in global manufacturing supply chains. The studies identified several key advantages of the Philippines' participation in these chains, including its close trade relations with neighboring countries, its continuing attractiveness for foreign investment, and a relatively young, skillful, and fast-learning workforce. The Philippines government is actively pushing forward multilateral and bilateral free trade negotiations. After signing RCEP in November of 2020, DTI has announced that it will explore joining the CPTPP in the future. The Philippines government has also resumed trade negotiations with Korea and expects to finalize that agreement this year. Now, regarding the RCEP agreement, there are criticisms that the deal will not significantly expand the export market for Philippine businesses, but lead to import inflow from Korea, China, and Vietnam, and thus bring additional challenges to the Philippine domestic industries who are struggling to recover from the pandemic. Like other Southeast Asian countries, the Philippines can profit from industry reallocation away from China. That's a trend that's ongoing, and it's a strong one. However, factors such as the business environment may constrain the Philippines to expand its footprint in the regional supply chain. The Philippines still ranks number 95 in the World Bank's Doing Business Index in 2020, and that's behind Vietnam, which is number 70, and Indonesia, which is ranked 73rd. So Philippine businesses can help address some of these constraints by working together to convince Filipinos and Congress that amending some of the key economic provisions in your constitution to allow the Philippines to adapt to new global competitiveness requirements, welcome more foreign investment, update labor and environmental laws, and position to drive a revolutionary increase in investment and trade. Philippine companies are among the best managed in Asia. Your people are among the most well-educated, resilient workforce in the world. Your geography and economic scale suggests the Philippines has every natural advantage, except, of course, for the exposure to tropical storms and volcanoes, of course. And I know those wreak havoc from time to time. But believing in these strengths and making the needed reforms will grow the economy of your great country provide new jobs and linkages to global opportunities and markets, and ensure what I believe could be a golden age of prosperity for Filipinos. I'm very hopeful for your future, and I really appreciate you inviting me, Dindo, and Secretary Albert. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that, Ernie. Our next speaker is Ambassador Benedicto Yuhico. He is the president of the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the country's largest business organization. He also served as special envoy of the president with the rank of ambassador for trade relations for Eastern Europe, then North America and Latin America. He will be talking about sustaining business growth. Ambassador Yuhico, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Ambassador Albert Del Rosario, Chairperson, Strat-based ADR Institute. Professor Dindo Manhit, President, Strat-based ADR Institute. Mr. Ernest Power, President and CEO, Power Group Asia. Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr., President, Employers Confederation of the Philippines. Mr. Gigi Montinola, President, Management Association of the Philippines. Mr. Edgar Chua, Chairman, Makati Business Club. Mr. Jaime Augusto Sobel de Ayala, Chairman and CEO, Ayala Corporation. Ambassadors and Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everyone. Before anything else, on behalf of PCCI, I wish to express our appreciation to the Strat-based ADR Institute for inviting PCCI to this virtual round table. Despite the challenges brought about by the COVID pandemic, we all need to move forward. Over the past year, the PCCI has continued to create opportunities to sustain business growth. Late last year, we completed the construction of the PCCI Innovation Center. This is the beginning of the realization of a dream to transform our country into an innovation nation, where we are able to provide a state-of-the-art ecosystem where our young people can learn, collaborate, share, and test new ideas and develop this into new systems, technologies, and businesses. Perhaps seeing the potential of the Innovation Center, early this year, PCCI was approached by Huawei with a partnership proposal for an innovation roadmap that centers on the adoption of cloud technology and artificial intelligence. This program takes on a three-pronged approach. One is engaging with the industry to create interest in the digital economy and identifying gaps in employment. Second is engaging with the academe to develop a curriculum focusing on 4IR, Fourth Industrial Revolution applications, and to develop talent-specific training modules for quick digital transformation. And third is engaging with government to help them transition smoothly to digital applications. The PCCI Huawei ICT Academy offers 3 training courses: mobile app development or Huawei Mobile Services, the Huawei Cloud Program, and artificial intelligence. Students or workers who will graduate from these courses will be given industry-recognized Huawei certificates as well as a PCCI chamber certificate. The training programs are offered to educational institutions free of charge as a corporate social responsibility project of both PCCI and Huawei. The industry track will train potential IT mentors who are expected to roll out the program for PCCI members, while the government track is envisioned to result in a product that government offices can use as they transition their services online. Huawei is just the beginning. We have also been approached and are now defining a collaboration with Microsoft in the areas of gaming and augmented virtual reality. I have had discussions with Albert Ortilla, the president or general manager of Microsoft Philippines. I was frankly surprised that Andres took the initiative to reach out to PCCI, set an appointment with me, and try to develop areas of collaboration. Jokingly, I told Andres, I thought the US forgot about the Philippines already. He smiled and said, no, we haven't forgotten. We just didn't take the opportunity to manifest our intention to help the Philippines as well. So now we are starting with discussions on how to implement the proposed collaboration. It is not only with China or the US that PCCI collaborates. With the Embassy of Israel, we are collaborating to implement technology to improve the yields in agriculture and aquaculture, and certification of our mangoes and coconuts, to name a few, to meet health requirements in advanced countries. I told the ambassador of Taiwan to the Philippines, Mr. Ambassador Pei Yong-shu, I am concerned that I see Taiwanese computers and electronic devices all over the Philippines. But why is it that we cannot see mangoes and coconuts, Philippine mangoes and coconuts in your country? To be fair with him and the local TECO office, since my comment to him about this, they have been working with PCCI to try to help so that our mangoes and coconuts can meet the health standards and finally be able to enter Taiwan. We are also in touch with India as well to explore the manufacture of vaccine and other healthcare products for our own use and for export. I think it is time for us to work with government to assess where we are, because in the future, we need to be better prepared, as we realized, to take care of our own people and not to depend on other countries for our health and welfare. We should develop capabilities in vaccine, medicine, and healthcare products. Our goal in putting up the Innovation Center is to contribute to the national government's goal of ending poverty by 2040. And we can do this by teaching and training our youth on technology so that we will be able to capitalize on the competitive advantage of a young and educated population. We need to capitalize on our demographic dividend. We need to get our young people educated and trained in technology. We need to get our MSMEs to embrace technology as well as to attain sustainability of their business. Everyone needs to innovate. PCCI has been a supporter and a partner of the Department of Finance in advocating for the comprehensive tax reform program. We were elated to see that the passage of CREATE is now awaiting for the signature of the President. We were glad to see Congress heed the call of the private sector to pass the bill which will help local businesses cope with losses due to COVID, as well provide an environment that will attract more foreign direct investments and hence the introduction of more and better technology and strengthening competition for the local market. We are pleased that aside from the immediate corporate income tax reduction and the incentives regime rationalization, the bill also provided COVID relief measures, although temporary. PCCI was also a key player behind the Pinas Muna Tayo campaign, with almost 30,000 direct and indirect members, 70% of which are MSMEs. PCCI is well aware of the suffering local businesses endured during the height of the enhanced community quarantine last year. In our consultations with members and local chambers, we saw how various industries experienced major losses and were rendered powerless. To reduce unemployment and increase economic activity, we are now calling on consumers and industry users to support Philippine-made products. We are actively supporting Department of Trade and Industries Buy Local, Go Local campaign, giving our full support to the promotion of the consumption of locally manufactured building materials such as cement and steel for public and private construction projects. The national government has also taken this further by passing the General Appropriations Act, which mandates government agencies to prioritize local building materials for infrastructure projects and all other activities. The key to a meaningful economic recovery is the efficient implementation of the vaccination program. Without this, we will not be able to achieve meaningful economic recovery and growth. As you know, PCCI last week issued a statement to the government requesting to please allow private sector to import the vaccines directly. Of course, taking into account whatever requirements they may impose. I also requested the government to please clarify what the requirements are so the private sector can be very clear and can start actually seeking their own sources of supply to be able to actually start the vaccination program and to assist the government in terms of being able to vaccinate all our nation's population. Moving forward, we must continue to search for ways to assist our priority sectors such as food and agribusiness, construction and infrastructure, BPOs, education, health and wellness, and even mining, where we have very good potential for growth. With these observations, PCCI continues to provide mentorship and training to our members, especially small businesses, to help them adjust to digital business processes and operations. In addition, last September of 2020, PCCI proposed to President Duterte to revise an existing executive order so as to allow satellite internet connectivity without the need of a congressional franchise. Frankly speaking, I thought this was already thrown in the wastebasket and forgotten until several weeks ago, we were told that the IATF and the economic cluster recommended the approval of this suggestion to PRRD. And we were elated to hear that last week, PRRD had signed Executive Order 127, which was essentially what we had proposed last September 2020. Through this new executive order, access is now possible for MSMEs, education, institutions in the countryside, far-flung municipalities, local government units, all over our archipelago to be able to access internet cheaply and effectively. Thank you, but before I end, I would like to invite everyone to visit the PCCI Innovation Center anytime at your convenience. I will be your personal guide. We will also have facilities there to host the seminars and get-togethers of Start-Based ADR in the future. Maraming salamat po. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you, Ambassador Yukiko. We might just take you up on that offer after we all get vaccinated.
Okay, anytime, Elizabeth.
Our next speaker is Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr. He is the president of the Employers Confederation of the Philippines, or ECOP. He also serves as president of the Philippine Exporters Confederation and is known as the founding director of the International Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. June will be talking about the calibrated reopening of the Philippine economy to spur employment. June, you have the floor.
Thank you, Beth. Start-Based ADR Institute Chairman Ambassador Albert Del Rosario and President Professor D. Dobanhit, distinguished fellow speakers and business leaders, other esteemed guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to be part of this forum that highlights the major role of the private sector in our economic recovery. In the past year, through this pandemic, we have seen evidence that the government enables the private sector and can make things happen. This theme is therefore an all-time relevant framework, especially as I focus on the topic assigned to me this morning, that of calibrated reopening of the economy. Business organizations have been harping on the further reopening of the economy in the past months, with many signals pointing to the justified need for it, while continuing to strictly implement the basic health and safety protocols. This has remained our stand to this day, even as the number of COVID-19 cases has reportedly gone up, and we have been placed under this NCR plus bubbles. We know that as a result of this pandemic and other natural calamities, the Philippines suffered its worst economic decline since 1947, slipping into recession with a record GDP contraction of 9.5% last year, ending 22 years of growth. Of this, total goods export dropped 10.1% to $63.77 billion in 2020. The decline in performance continued on to January this year, with merchandise exports shrinking by 5.2% to $5.49 billion in January after a revised 1.7% yearly growth in December 2020 and 9.4% in January 2020. The January record marked its first fall following 2 straight months of year-on-year expansion. I mentioned exports because it is still a major economic driver, accounting for some 30% of the country's GDP. And we see further huge economic loss even if this new lockdown is only good for 2 weeks. This will cost billions because we are reversing the growth momentum just for a very small impact. Also critical to note here are that the jobs of some 4.5 million Filipinos who were either laid off permanently or temporarily last year is at stake. Not to mention that in the informal sector, at the employment of 10.3%, this is for the highest in 15 years. But there is what is more worrisome is that more big businesses like we all know, Makati Chandra,
June, we are not hearing you now. June?
yes, of course not. It makes businesses to ensure that consumers feel confident enough to go out and again contribute to moving the economy. The increased number of COVID-19 cases in the past week may be alarming to us, but this can be totally misleading due to the possible false positives among the infected individuals. I will go back to this point later. And this is why, since the day one last year, we had been advocating for concrete, practical, less costly measures to help both government and private sector contribute to suppressing the spread of this virus. Let me quickly go to them. First and foremost, suspend the Data Privacy Act to facilitate contact tracing. By doing so, we reverse the process of hiding infected people to making voluntary disclosure happen the way many government officials and high-profile personalities come out in the open as part of the safety measures. With this information, they can immediately be isolated within the rest of the family and community members go on their lives. For your information, at the beginning, we understand that there were 125,000 contact tracers being paid, billions. And recently, loaded in the present uh, uh, funding is another 5 billion to hire additional 50,000 contact tracers. And we understand that this is now used up and we are asking for more. Second, as people volunteer to this disclosure, there should be medical grade guarantee quarantine centers in strategic barangays where they can be isolated and treated well and not take their chance in their houses where they can further infect others. Some worn out tents or neglected buildings. Just as we have concern with the vaccine storage facilities, we need to ensure that we continue to put up and maintain such quarantine centers as part of the confidence building, prevention of further infection, and continuing economic activities. This is also one area where government can help address the current unemployment issues, particularly in non-essential sectors, by engaging people for the setup and upkeep of their facilities. This can remain useful even after COVID-19 as health and wellness centers in LGU. We then welcome the announcement from Isolation SAR and Public Works Secretary Mark Villar, who recently said in a news report that the government is preparing 720 more quarantine facilities to be built by April to add to our current 600. This will translate to some 26,000 COVID-19 beds in total from the existing 22,000. The focus is on augmenting the capacity in the National Capital Region. Again, the epicenter of the new cases, where 3.2 million people, or one-fourth of its population, are now hungry due to GCQ. This is based on the report of NEDA Secretary Carl Chua to the IF on March 23. Compare this with the local total nationwide COVID-19 cases of 671,792, of which 80,970 were active cases, and deaths of 12,972 as of March 22. Third, as we test and identify COVID-19 patients, let us be careful not to dwell on the number of positive cases, mindful that although infectious, COVID-19 is not as deadly as other viruses that struck in the past, nor is it the cause of most death in the Philippines in 2020. Then the data, in fact, shows that there are more deaths from heart attack, diabetes, pneumonia, and other illnesses because people either could not go to the hospital for their treatment or they do not have the money to pay for these treatments. Not that we do not care about COVID-19 fatality rate, which should be in fact be the point of analysis so that the right and calibrated intervention can be arrived at. To the credit of technology, modern science, and our capacity building, the death rate appears to be really slowed down. We just need to analyze where the deaths are, who are dying and why. In this context, studies on the effective use of ivermectin as a prophylaxis are indeed worth looking at. Incidentally, I and my household and a lot of friends and in the community have been taking these vitamins as we wait for this vaccine. Back to data gathering and analysis, I have repeatedly raised the alarm against cold experts who keep generating frightening numbers that are not helping at all. We have no problems with the numbers, but what we are worried about is why did the government allow uh, this private sector to take on the information dissemination and even give advice on lockdowns, on curfew, and I don't know why they give this up to this. No. I'm happy that at least the last few days we see that the that the government is now going back at the ball, giving information that should have been coming from them from the first place. Fourth, in improving market confidence, we are obviously only also concerned about the implementation of vaccine. In many fora, a news report, government has affirmed that it will shoulder the cost and procurement of vaccines. Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez assured of a 75 billion budget to cover the inoculation requirement of 55% of at least 50 billion Filipinos. As we speak, Sinovac and AstraZeneca vaccines are already being distributed nationwide, even as we expect more to come. Unfortunately, it appears like our workers are at the bottom list of the LGU priorities. Relevant to this, we have openly raised the issue of easing the procurement process of these vaccines by the private sector, which can handle this faster and perhaps even better. This can mean amending Section 5 of Republic Act 11525 on the vaccine implementation. We can advance the money, unlike the government, contact the same government suppliers with the EUA and facilitate the implementation. Even remote mining areas can be taken care of. Note that anything that the private sector buys will mean savings from the 75 billion vaccine budget of the government. In return, we expect, of course, that the government will will extend the indemnity guarantee if it's required on the private sector purchases as needed by the supplier. After all, the government is supposed to vaccinate them, and we are just putting up the money. So why should that the indemnity be uh, given to them, guarantee be given to them? Fifth, a very critical requirement to increase economic activity is deploying public transportation. This was reaffirmed by the result of the survey that we in PhilExport in January this year that cited insufficient transportation as the reason why many of our members who are not fully operating at that point. Most of our members are exporters who are supposed to be allowed to operate through the quarantine 100% while complying with the protocols. We believe that government should just allow all health compliant and roadworthy PUBs to fly the routes again. We can attend to the modernization program of, uh, of the jeepneys, the bus, and the Employers' Confederation Agreement is in a joint statement with other major labor groups, has also espoused service contracting that will ensure some take-home pay for our transport workers, prevent passenger competition, and help the government enforce public health standards for the millions of our workers who risk unsafe travel to reach their workplace. Mobility is obviously a very critical intervention in our trust to move goods and people swiftly to address the shorter supply of basic goods and raw materials that artificially jacked up their prices and prompted calls for higher wages. While we sympathize with our employees and labor groups hurting from high prices of basic goods and services because of these policies, it really is counterproductive to raise salary if that means businesses closing shop because of additional costs. On the first day of this NCR bubble status, we are already given leads of LGUs that have imposed roadblocks and additional permits that make the transport of goods difficult, if not costly and impossible. Relaxing lockdowns would mean more businesses can restart operations and hopefully restore profit so that higher salaries can be supported. Our priority now is to keep the jobs that we still have. Despite financial constraints, employers have the right to comply with safety and health protocols as part of the occupational safety and health law, as well as many of our workers, to the extent that our resources will allow, are being kept. We have likewise adopted technology and implemented flexi work arrangement as part of the business continuity program to help the economy. Finally, in our list of recovery measures, we anticipate the passage of the trade bill, which is expected to attract more and the right kinds of investment, particularly in underdeveloped regions in the country. For the same reason, we likewise support, among others, the amendments of the Public Service Act, the Magna Carta for MSMEs that will free this SB corporation from its regulatory accountability under Bangko Sentral, so it can come out with packages that is outside of the banking parameters. Warehouse Receipts Bill that aims to expand MSME lending with the use of movable collaterals, and amendments to the charter of agencies such as the Philippine Ports Authority to help reduce the cost of shipping. These proposals should be taken as a package, as they will be addressing various aspects of business operation towards recovery, which is resilience and eventual resurgence. The government expects the economy to expand from 6.5 to 7.5 this year, although international economic think tanks project the Philippine economy to achieve as much as 8% this year, higher than its earlier target of 7.7. As you might have also read from the papers, we have downgraded our export target this year in 2022 to reflect the extent of the impact of the pandemic. We are now aiming for only $105 billion instead of the $122 billion to $130 billion in goods and services export by 2022. For what should have been an annual growth of 8.9% to 9.9%, until November last year, Philippine export performance remains below East Asian economies, especially China, Taiwan, Vietnam, and Korea, that are leading global trade recovery. We then sincerely hope that the coming election, including politicking that distorts COVID-19 interventions, will not distract us from priorities that will find solutions to these challenges and make us achieve our recovery and growth targets. Thank you and good morning to everyone.
Thank you, June. Our next speaker is Mr. Aurelio Gigi Montinola III. He is the president of the Management Association of the Philippines. He is also the chair of the Far Eastern University Group of Companies and previously served as president and CEO of the Bank of the Philippine Islands. Gigi will be speaking about promoting management excellence to achieve post-pandemic prosperity. Gigi, you have the floor.
Ambassador Albert Del Rosario, distinguished heads of the various business chambers, panelists, and conference participants. I have an intriguing speech titled, quote, "Promoting Management Excellence to Achieve Post-Pandemic Prosperity," unquote. It presumes that I, a semi-retired person, can give you advice on all of the above. But aren't we all zoomed out with all the Zoom webinars we have listened to or participated in the past year? Sadly, as former Health Secretary Dr. Esperanza Cabral has mentioned, we are back to square -1 on the health front. The economic others have spoken about how badly we are in, and worse, we even have 200 Chinese, quote, fishing, unquote, boats seeking bad weather refuge in a sunlit West Philippine Sea. I shall therefore not bore you with a PowerPoint presentation on what other more prominent international and local management practitioners can do better than me. Instead, I will comment on the general setting and what I consider to be some practical advice. Each generation has a, quote, once in a lifetime, unquote, life-changing experience. For my parents, it was World War II. For my generation, it was martial law. For this generation, it will be the COVID-19 pandemic. Each event lasted longer than anyone thought and was, at minimum, life-threatening to many. And yet each major crisis brought massive opportunity. The Philippines gained independence and rebuilt itself with a new generation of entrepreneurs after World War II. Post-EDSA 1986 saw zigzagging political change the first 15 years, and then steady upward economic progress the next 18 years, to the point where NEDA Secretary Carl Kenrick Chua said we were on the cusp of becoming an upper middle income country before COVID-19 cruelly struck in 2020. I myself have witnessed 4 major economic crises, effectively one per decade. In the 80s, it was the Philippine debt moratorium from 1983 to 85. In the 90s, it was the Asian financial crisis from 96 to 97. In the 2000s, it was the global financial crisis in 2008 to 2009. We thought that we had miraculously escaped the 2010s, but then COVID-19 hit us like a sledgehammer in 2020. Sadly, from being considered one of the best economies in Asia, we are forecasted to be one of the slowest to recover to pre-COVID levels. Where are we in 2021? As Management Association of the Philippines president, I've outlined 5 crises that befell us in 2020. A health pandemic crisis, an economic 9.5% negative GDP growth crisis, an environmental critical climate decade, an education learning crisis, and a social justice, jobs, food, and values formation crisis. As such, the MAP's 2021 theme is the Great Reset, leading for the common good, and its main program is to safely reopen the economy. Worldwide, our lives have inextricably changed. Mask wearing, social distancing, working from home, remote learning, perpetual Zoom meetings, takeout food, delivery orders, Netflix, etc. The United States has a new president, Joseph Biden. The United Kingdom is officially now in Brexit, and COVID-19 vaccinations are proceeding, albeit in the developed countries first. The Philippines has an impressive new Skyway connector road, but unfortunately a lost school year with a remote learning mandate despite unequal Wi-Fi and vaccinations just starting. So looking forward, I feel the mood matters. First, stay cool. My major learning after 4 economic crises is that by simply surviving, you're 80% ahead of the others. Control what you can, observe what you cannot, and do not get swayed by incessant negative doomsday social media posts. Vaccination is a complement, not a cure. And despite all our impatience, we are only 6 months behind the world in achieving significant vaccination. That is, if we can fulfill the government promise to vaccinate everyone in 2021. Having the longest lockdown in the world is inexcusable. But then again, our total number of cases, 600,000 plus, is approximately the same as deaths in the US, also 600,000 plus. And as Sergio Luis Ortiz has mentioned, our death rate is still around the 2% range, slightly over 12,000, but lower than heart disease and other diseases last year. Second, stay focused. Be aware of what you can and cannot do during this pandemic, and always think through who's the client. Is it you? And what product? Is it a simpler business and or personal lifestyle? Lack of mobility, difficulty in logistics, inadequate public transportation, continued mask wearing, social distancing, and lack of consumer confidence are the major negatives. But digitalization, work from home, and a rapid positive cultural pivot towards climate change, healthier lifestyles, and simpler lives are the big positives. The vaccine will help, but don't bet your business or personal on it. We will all be learning to live with this next normal semi-permanently. Third, stay positive. We are probably at our worst point since the 1983 to 85 crisis, and therefore the only way is up. Think opportunity, not risk, and be happy that we Filipinos are both creative and resilient, two traits immensely useful in crisis times. So more to the point, walk the talk. Again, first, follow a general plan. Stay safe and healthy. Diet, sleep, and exercise are still the big three, while getting vaccinated, continued mask wearing, and avoiding large crowds are the new normal three. As head of the MAP, I stick religiously to our mantra of, quote, the Great Reset, leading for the common good, unquote, with main themes of safely reopening the economy, ESG, and member benefits via shared webinars. Specifically, we concentrate on our 5 crisis areas: health, economic, environmental, education, and social justice. Second, ally with the private sector. As ADR Dindo Manhit's opening remarks mentioned, the private sector is the trusted and proven development partner of government. Leverage your valuable contacts with key private sector names. Fortunately, the business associations such as the Pcci, ADR, Makati Business, MAP, ECOP, and others are generally, the foreign chambers, PBED, FINEX, etc., are generally working together in an effective manner. Stay informed. For example, the MAP has one information webinar every week and monthly committee consultation meetings on various topics. Select your causes. You cannot and do not want to do everything, and your audience, particularly if government, does not want you perpetually telling them what to do. Third, work with the government sector. Government is huge and has its own priorities, interests, and favored causes and people. Personally, I like to get my information through my MAP IATF contacts, to stay close to my DOF contacts, and to work through PBED for my education costs. Again, fortunately, the MAP has valuable contacts and constructive influence through its governors and committee chairs in so many areas. Also, I stick to content and leave the politicking to others. Fourth, what not to do. For your personal health and sanity, this is equally important. I have minimal interest in other countries' internal affairs, except to monitor the pace of vaccine rollouts and the effect of all the stimulus programs on the economic health of the country. I look at my Viber and WhatsApp chat groups infrequently during the day, so I don't get inundated and depressed with the continuous stream of negative social media comments. Lastly, I don't even bother to read the exotic financial suggestions we all get on investment possibilities. Fifth, keep the faith. When I was in my 30s, I thought the Philippines was hopeless during the 1983 to 85 crisis. Yet the miraculous EDSA revolution in 1986 happened, and we had roughly 30 plus years of upward political, social, and economic progress. The pandemic today looks gruesome, but even if we are the slowest to recover, this too will pass, and we all have to do our share to make it pass more quickly. In the meantime, find a way to stay safe, healthy, and vaccinated within the next 6 months. Stay true to your general plan and help others where you can. Jobs, food, and values formation are the MAP's social justice program, and we are all in a position to help others. Good luck, and congratulations again to ADR Stratbase for putting together a seminar like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gigi. Our next speaker is Mr. Edgar Chua. He is the chairman of the Makati Business Club, and he has had many years of experience in the petroleum business as the former country chairman of Shell companies in the Philippines for more than a decade. Mr. Chua will be talking to us about policy advocacies for inclusive recovery. You have the floor, Ed.
Thank you very much, Beth, and good morning to Ambassador Del Rosario, to Dindo Manhit, distinguished panelists and guests. There is a saying that one should never waste a crisis. We are in the midst of one, and it is imperative that business and government use this crisis to identify, prioritize, and quickly implement policies that will lead to inclusive recovery. The previous speakers have already identified quite a number of policies and initiatives along these lines. And there are many policies that are needed to achieve inclusive recovery. But for today's presentation, I will focus on two areas. These areas we at the MBC board have actually been looking at and believe to be key to inclusive recovery, to an inclusive economy. One is agriculture, and the other is education. So why agriculture? In the Philippines, the farmers remain as one of the poorest sectors with the highest poverty incidence at 31.6, followed by fisherfolk at 26.2, and the people residing in rural areas at 24.5%. This is the sector that provides food security to the country. This is the sector that can provide affordable food to reduce hunger and malnutrition. If we look at our neighboring countries, Thailand, Vietnam, prices of rice and food are much lower than the prices that we have. In turn, this results in demand for higher minimum wage, and we become uncompetitive relative to our neighboring countries in terms of labor cost. The 2020 World Bank report entitled Transforming Philippine Agriculture During and Post-COVID highlighted modernization and diversification of crops as critical movements to improve agricultural productivity, which has high potential to translate into improved income for farmers and the rural population. The report notes several challenges and recommendations, which are not new, but continue to remain as problems and plans respectively. Number one, land holdings are fragmented, making mechanization and other investments non-viable. It caps production, keeps farmers overly dependent on middlemen, and it does not attract private capital. The ADRi law has not solved the issue. And a solution being proposed is to promote the consolidation by lease, cooperatives, or other forms, and to reform the ADRi Credit Act. The second issue is that government spending is focused on subsidies or import duties, which distorts the production and markets. A solution being proposed is to shift spending to research and development, to improve productivity and market connectivity, and to lower the various costs associated with the whole value chain. A third issue which has been identified is that our crops remain low value and not diversified, despite laws intended to promote the shift. Our neighboring countries are not dependent on 5 major crops. We are. They have 20, more than 20 crops, which they export, they produce locally and are self-sufficient. Now we have the laws to actually do this, but we have not actually done anything, as we have seen in many laws. What we need is to develop a firm plan and allocate a sufficient budget for the effective implementation to promote the shift. The Foundation for Economic Reform have also identified other possible reforms that should be considered. Warehouse receipts law, crop insurance, forestry reforms, national land use, and the land administration system. I will now go to the second issue. Why education? Unless one is extremely talented in sports or in the arts, the best hope to improve one's life is through quality education. Our participation in international assessments in the last few years has revealed low learning outcomes of our students in reading, mathematics, science, and 21st century skills. The PISA 2018, which actually addresses or tests 15-year-old students, has resulted in the Philippines coming out last out of 78 economies. The TIMSS 2019, which looks at grade 4 students, again, we turned out last out of 64 economies. This is very disheartening, to say the least. And the reasons for the dismal education performance have been identified, and I borrow the following slides from the Philippine Business for Education, who has been spending so much time to analyze our problems and to present solutions. So PBET has actually identified a number of problems. One, our education spending relative to GDP remains very low. We have the lowest cumulative spending per student among the PISA 2018 participating countries, and there are 78 countries which participated. Many of them are developing countries. Second, we have limited access to preschool. Our neighboring countries provide 3 years. We provide 1 year preschool. This reminds us of the issue on K-12. Third, we have low teacher quality, especially in our public schools. Fourth, the children go to school hungry. 1 out of 3 Filipino children under 5 is undernourished and are thus not ready to learn. Based on scientific research, the first 1,000 days of a person's life, which includes the time in the mother's womb, is very, very critical. So the vitamins, protein, iron, zinc, iodine, which are essential to toddlers' rapid brain development, are essential during the first 1,000 days. And based on scientific research, the damage done by nutrition deficiencies in pregnancy in the first 2 years of a child's physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development can be irreversible. The pandemic will worsen the situation. Note that 74% of our public schools do not have internet access, and many students do not have any device to receive whatever learning materials would be sent through the internet. We often hear that our demographics is a sweet spot that will enable us to significantly grow our economy. But if our youth are not properly equipped and nourished, the soft spot in reality will be a sore spot, as they will not be able to realize their full potential and support the country's development plan. They will be condemned to a life of struggle. Now, PBET, the Philippine Business for Education, has come up with several recommendations which I believe are extremely important. One, address malnutrition and stunting among 0 to 5-year-old children and students through a strong implementation of the Philippine Plan of Action for Nutrition. Second, increase the budget and resources for education. Note that we have the lowest cumulative budget for educating our children. We need to widen the pie and ensure accountability. We need to mandate the LGUs to provide additional funding for education. We need to ensure that education gets 20% of the national budget. Most of the national budget for education just goes to salaries of our teachers. We need to provide last mile schools, and we need to move to a digital transformation. Third, establish an autonomous assessment agency, which consistently diagnose strengths and weaknesses and target interventions. We need to provide, and this is where the private sector can help. Business especially has an idea, a good idea of what will be required moving forward into the future as far as the type of education that is needed to equip the workers for the future. They need to be involved in providing this to the DepEd, to CHED, to TESDA. We need to infuse our system with the best and brightest teachers by providing a national teacher education scholarship bill. And lastly, we need to bridge the gaps and strengthen the implementation of the mother tongue-based multilingual education. We have a big task ahead of us as a country, as a business group. And like everyone else, business has a very huge stake in addressing the issues I discussed. Growth and democracy can only be sustained if the economy is truly inclusive. While we as a country normally take our time in doing things, we're actually galvanized into action whenever there is a crisis. We have one now, so let's not waste it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. So now we're going to go into the open forum, and Paco, you will let us know when we have reached our time limit. But I think we've learned so much from all the presentations that we have from our speakers today. I think only a few would have predicted that the cause of the next economic downturn would be a virus. So the effects are clear. We've heard that disruptions in supply chains, production levels, workforce, and companies, both large and small, actually have been devastated. And it also magnified this growing problem of inequality. Now, one of the common underlying principles that I hear from all the speakers' presentations, and also the theme of this forum, is shared prosperity. It is the way forward, and it in fact is the big businesses' response to inequality and the pandemic. Last year in November, MBC, PCCI, MAP, perhaps also ECOP, actually signed the Shared Prosperity Covenant, where the top business groups had commitments to 6 stakeholders. And each one of those stakeholders actually has been talked about in each presentation. So commitment to employees, addressed by June, commitment to customers and suppliers. These are key to sustaining business growth, that's addressed by Ambassador Yuhiko. Commitment to shareholders by delivering reasonable and just returns achieved through management excellence, that is covered by Gigi from MAP. And commitment to community, agriculture and education, affordable food, and the environment, the ultimate inclusive recovery that includes the climate crisis, as discussed by Ed. So as putting this all things together, from each one of the speakers, what policy statements are actually put into action now? And what are some of the metrics that were used? And how are we performing against those metrics? Because the Shared Prosperity Covenant is businesses' response to the pandemic. So what are some of the policy statements that are in action now? We can start with MAP, with Gigi, please. Please unmute. Thank
Okay,
you.
can you just rephrase that, the policy actions?
Yes, because MAP is one of the signatories for the Shared Prosperity Covenant. And that is big businesses' response to the pandemic and the inequality that we see as a result of this pandemic. So there are commitments to 6 stakeholders, and there are supposed to be policy statements that are put into place that is actionable in order to solve this or help mitigate the problems. So for MAP, as Management Excellence Management Association of the Philippines, what are some of the actionable policies, the metrics that you have, and the performance to help mitigate this?
Okay. Well, the first point is to include it in our 2021 roadmap, no? And the specific last one, which is the social justice. And we've specifically mentioned jobs, food, and values formation as the three tenets to that. No, the jobs obviously comes with the economic, the food and the values come with the social justice. And I think what we're doing is we're really educating our members. So there are webinars on this headed by Rex Drilon and other people. No, so it's more rather than just get people to just sign something or advocate something. It's a whole thing of engaging them so that they will all be on the same page, and quite a few are.
And there are metrics actually that are being used so that we can have address the performance that are against those metrics.
Yes, it's in the formulation stage, but like all of these things in this very major agreements, I think it's equally important to get shall we say agreement on what everything should be, right? And that's a process that's happening at the moment. Now, right now we have our hands full, by the way, on just the health and the economic front for many of the reasons that the previous speakers spoke about. So the urgent move today is the health and the economic front, but there's also action on the other three.
Yes, and there's also balance that we're going to need to do, as what June was saying, that we have to protect both life and livelihood. So June, are you with us? June?
I'm sorry, I stepped out. I didn't hear. Is there a question?
No, probably because it's very important. There's a lot of businesses, both large and small, have been affected direly. And one of the things, priorities, is really to keep the jobs that we have. And your advocacy really is to protect both life and livelihood. And ECOP actually urged the government to craft some quarantine policies. And there's, I think, 13 policies. Out of the 13, which ones are being implemented?
Well, all the policies that will be given by the government we implement, but we always comment on some of the policies that they comment. And there are really some areas where there will be job losses that we have always commented on that. And thankfully, I think the government is with us in really trying to preserve the jobs as much as possible.
All right, and for Ambassador Yukiko, for PCCI, one of the largest association business groups out there, you have tied up with countries and Israel, India, collaborations with Microsoft, etc. And it's true that we really, it is digitalization that's going to move us forward. Can you share some examples on how of some of the companies, the members of PCCI, have actually future-proofed themselves?
Okay, in terms of, let's pick an example of a small MSME in the retail business. What to do going forward? The customers can't even go to the malls. Who do they sell to? What happens now? So we teach them, we tell them, look, you have an alternative, you have to think out of the box. We will teach you how to put your products online. We will teach you how to use the platform. In fact, we have developed a digital platform so that they can sell their products online. So specifically, it's not like, okay, what can I do? There are no customers coming into the mall. Should I just close? Our answer is no. We will educate. We will teach you alternatives. We will give you opportunities so that you can repurpose your business. Now, restaurant. If you're a restaurant, same thing. What do? You just close? No. He said, look around you. There's so much take out order opportunity. You've got to just learn how to be able to connect to the delivery service. For example, you have to learn how to connect to the food ordering supply chain, so that when customers or potential customers open their phone and look for Chinese food, your name will appear and possibly order from you. What we are telling people is, look, we know life is tough, but in fact, it's also an opportunity for you to repurpose and survive. But I want to go back, Elizabeth, to shared prosperity. On the short term, our objective in PCCI is to keep employment as much as possible. So we tell our members, we need to keep them. Otherwise, there's no employment, there's no salary. No salary, no money, no money, no food. No food, what? We die? Cannot. So we just have to try, and you come to PCCI and we will try to help. So short term, that's what we are doing. Medium term, for example, we talk to the BPO. Say, hey guys, you are enjoying good business now, but you are all going to be replaced by artificial intelligence in 2 or 3 years. So you better learn how to use yourselves artificial intelligence. Otherwise, you'll be out of the business. So we actually help, or we suggest, we say, look, if you want help, you come to us. We will help you, or we will put you to people who can help you. And long term, how do we share prosperity long term? The problem now is technology actually creates a much bigger gap between the rich and the poor. Look at the United States. What's happening there? There are so many poor people now there that I could not even imagine. People in the streets. And why? Because they're losing their jobs. People in their 40s, people in their 50s, they're being replaced by robots and all kinds of technology. Now, so long term, we don't want this to happen to us. No? So hopefully we can teach the technology to our young people. And lastly, I'd like to mention the agriculture. Agriculture and food security, these go hand in hand. So we have to use, again, technology, innovation, and we have to help, specifically help, as someone mentioned, the farmers, the fisher folk. Let's actually, it's not just technology they need. They can't eat technology. They can't buy fertilizer with technology. We have to have a holistic approach. Look at this as a big an advocacy for the government and private sector, and say, look, private sector will actually give them technology. Government, you help in the financing, and together we will improve the yields in rice and other parts of agriculture. So that's what we do, because otherwise there's no quick solution here. It's not a light switch that will turn on and off. We have to work towards a shared prosperity.
So how can the farmers have access to this? Like what Ed mentioned, it's very important. Agriculture and education really is food. And that's the future beyond pandemic, because as we know, this will not be the last pandemic we will be facing as a nation or even globally. How can, Ed, how can fisher folk, how can farmers get access to those instruments that would actually help them, that will be tools for them to actually move forward? And this goes with education as well. Ambassador Yuhiko, you said that there's going to be internet, low-cost internet availability, and that really is democratization of education, to say the least. How can we actually get and build public support for this? And how can the farmers, fisher folk, and low-income, very low-income communities access these technologies as tools to enable them to move forward?
Beth, actually there, that's a very complex question with a number of items for me to answer. But let me just focus on one, which is financial inclusion.
Mm.
The BSP has 51 million Filipinos do not have access. They don't have a bank account, And so during the last pandemic, you saw that even in the distribution of the aid of government, you saw long queues, people signing paper, and what we're trying to avoid, which is congregation of people, etc. That's not happening because people have to go there to get their support. So this is one area where the Makati Business Club, working with the Bankers Association of the Philippines and the Management Association of the Philippines, we have been working with the PSA on the national ID system so that it becomes easier for people to have access to what we call this, the financial instruments. Because many people, I realized this during the pandemic when people started asking for small help. The gardener, the barber, the caddy, all these people, and I could not send money because they don't have any bank account.
Yes.
So it was very, very difficult. Yeah. Now, fortunately, of late, I have seen that people now have GCash. GCash is much easier, so I transfer money via GCash, which is very different compared to a bank's requirement because the bank has so much requirement on KYC, know your customer, and so on.
Right.
And I think we're moving in that direction. So this is a very positive move in terms of people being able to get access to finance. And I think it's a small step, but there are many other steps that need to be taken. Now, as far as being able to access technology, I think that's where government and the business sector can provide assistance. We have seen this in terms of Nestle. Nestle has partnered with cooperatives to grow coffee because they import a lot of their coffee. We have seen this with Jollibee in terms of potatoes. And there are many, many other examples of how business is partnering with the farmers, enabling them to actually connect directly to the market, removing the middlemen, being provided with technology. So there are quite a few examples, but what we need to do is do much more of this and scale it up. And that's where we need government help because the private sector can do something, but it's still government that has this huge machinery and resources to be able to do this. So I mean, just to give you some examples, Beth.
Elizabeth, can I add to what Ed said?
Yes,
Because
please.
it's just technology. Let me share with you some low-hanging fruit, so to speak. For example, government should improve farm-to-market roads so that the farmers can actually easily bring their produce to the market. Okay, that's one of on-the-ground complaints of farmers. Number two, government should actually implement the plan of putting up cold storage in strategic locations. Why? Because nabubulok yung mga perishable products, which because of lack of cold storage. Now, we don't have to wait 10 years to do that. We don't have to educate them with technology. We just have to say, hey, government, look, it's really, really a priority. Do you know how much rice is spoiled because they don't have the proper facilities? 10 to 15%. So it's a low-hanging fruit. Hey, let's help these guys in very simple ways, and then slowly build up as we go along. So those are two examples of what
Ambassador,
way.
that problem has been a long problem that's been long time ago. It is
Yes.
not a new problem. What is
Yes.
called up?
Well,
It is not a new problem.
Well, we need private sector to prod the government. That's why not too long ago, I asked Bobby Amores, PCCI director, can you please tell your friend, Willie Dar, to give me a copy? We have a plan of nationwide how to set up cold storage. But 2 months already, I still don't have the plan. Why? Why? Anyway, don't get me moving in that direction. But what I'm saying is that, okay, so PCCI will just push and push and push until we are able to get the result.
But I think based on your talks also, one thing is good is that the digitalization of business has been accelerated. And for those people who have not been using the likes of, for example, Gcash before, I am now using that because it's very convenient. It's very fast, quick. And like you said, it's very little KYC and it gets the job done. So businesses, how get examples for businesses and even employers that where the workers benefit from the use of digital instruments. From your point of view, June, what are some of the examples where your requests from the workers or what the companies are doing? And what are some of the examples like success stories that you can actually share?
Well, recently, there were, well, let me put it this way. Every year, there are at least 100 bills that are filed or refiled. And these are supposed to be progressive bills, but mainly filed by many of the party list, representing women, representing workers, representing the poor. And these are all bills that we try to fight every time. And there are times that one or two is able to pass by. One example is perhaps one time the salary increase the malaki that we were able to reverse later on. So there are bills again that would like to that is proposing, for instance, to make COVID a compensable disease. And that can be complicated. We're all paying ECC, Employees Compensation Commission, as our insurer, but according to the bill, we are supposed to pay. And how difficult it is to control and to prove that COVID is a compensable disease. That the principle there of compensation is the workers' compensation was we are basically insured. What we are doing in the past, in the previous years, now the Employment Compensation Commission is supposed to be paying. But here comes another one that we're supposed to pay additional. And it might be a shock to many of us here. There is a filing of a bill that is called, I think, wealth bill, which demands that people in the top, I don't know if it's a top 1,000, will have to other over and above what they have filed, the dictated, they will have to give 10% of their assets to this, so that it can be shared by the poor. These are some of the atrocious bills that that are being filed, and there's a lot of example. For instance, if we did not fight it, they would have gotten away again with this new bill that at the beginning they are saying it will not be charged to the company, but it looks like it will be charged to the company. I forgot which is so now they clarified it that it's not going to be charged to the company in relation to pandemic. So many bills like that. So you have to really be alert. Otherwise, it's a good thing that the filing of the 100 peso bill increase across the board was immediately dismissed by the Wage Board Commission. Of course, for some technicality, the Wage Board is not supposed to decide on across the board, but they made an error. They filed it across the board instead of minimum wage, and that is not within the purview of the tripartite. So that has been dismissed. I don't know if they will refile it. They threatened to refile it for minimum wage, but this is obviously untimely. The Department of Labor has already given some guidelines on so that jobs will not be lost. Like for instance, a furlough of 6 months before, you remember?
Mhm.
And then if you don't want to dismiss it, so if you don't want to close your company, and then they also said that provided you discuss it with your workers, you can talk about lowering salaries, provided it's not below minimum wage, and that is okay. I think a lot of the small companies did that, made use of it. There is also that the time and the number of works, number of hours and days to be worked, which can be distributed or can be rotated among others, so that people will not have to be. So these are the kind of things that fortunately we are able to take care of.
Yeah, do you find upskilling, reskilling, retraining of the workforce is key, actually,
So
especially when where companies are closing, and the ones that are most hit are in the travel and hospitality industries. What can you say about reskilling, upskilling?
we have partnered with, for instance, the Danish industrial group. We have also with ILO. We have a lot of we have partnered with them, giving seminars, giving workshop, and teaching them on skills development. We have webinar almost twice a week on reskilling and teaching employees to be able to survive with this, and also after this, where to go. So ECOP has been busy doing at least two seminars on this every week.
Hmm. Now, there's some questions here from the ones who are attending, asking if you can comment on which industries are seen providing the largest employment.
Well, obviously the BPOs are still there, and the services sector. Without those, in the informal sector, the agriculture is still employing a lot. Obviously, the one that was basically decimated is the tourism, restaurants and hotels. They really have lost their employment, and that is why we have been fighting for any restriction that will further make it difficult for them. In restaurants, for instance, if you lose 10% of your clients, you have a problem. If you lose 20%, you're certainly losing. But to require that you operate on 50%, is there's no sense. You really have just to close, and how many waiters have lost their jobs, and that is why while we agree that the bubble thing that they have done is better than total lockdown, it's still costly in terms of for the economy, and it's still very difficult for a lot of people who will lose their job because of it.
Yeah. So in terms of for the companies and the heads of association like MAP and Pcci and NBC, how much of an impact does the Chile relationship between the U.S. and China have? Well, it's affected our supply chains, but how much of an impact does that have on the businesses here locally in the Philippines in terms of supply chain disruption?
Well, we are not the biggest exporter to China nor the U.S., but we do. They're our biggest trading partners. So, anything that they do, we certainly are affected. However, I don't think if we are losing businesses, it's because of the problem between the two of them. I think it's really more of the market shrinking. So we have not yet felt it, if that is the problem. Because the BPOs, which are supposed to be affected, but I guess the principals are in the US, and they do have, with China also. So they're forced to put together and live with it.
Yeah. Is that the same for NBC and MAP? Gigi?
I think as Ernie Bauer mentioned, the difficulty will be for Philippine companies who want to do business with both the US and China, because there's the possibility that there may be some new US restrictions. No? So I think that's the main one. Well, specifically, a name like Jollibee, which I think is in both places. The second one is more related to individual company dynamics. And I think for now, on a relative basis, we're too small to get caught up in that whole US-China issue. But bottom line, we need peace, right? We need
Right.
really more certainty, less volatility. Unfortunately, the two big powers are sort of testing each other. Ernie Bauer also, brought up that Alaska meeting. So it's going to be like that for a while. But the bigger issues will all be local rather than US, China, at least for now.
One of the questions before was that companies are having still finding it hard to access loans. Is that still the case for MBC and NAP and PCCI, Ambassador? Is that still the case? Still finding it difficult to access loans?
Well, let me be specific. I'll use one example. The DTI has a subsidiary called SB Corporation. SB Corporation is supposed to be the one to help out small and medium-sized enterprises for their financing requirements. So PCCI and SB Corporation signed a memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreement, and the objective is to facilitate the approval and the release of loans. So we were happy, at least, that the agreement was signed. But on the ground, the loan applications approval still slow,
Yes.
and the releases are even slower. So we are continuing to work with them. Actually, PCCI, I hired 2 ex-bankers to help MSMEs navigate this very difficult area. So anyway, it's still difficult, but they're trying and we're trying.
Excellent. Okay, so we are actually,
Beth, if I may,
yes, June, please.
In Asia, our MSME is the most underbanked sector in the whole of Asia. And time by time, government comes out with program, but it does not even scratch the surface. So we are not really serious in addressing MSME. We tried, for instance, 18 years ago, in the passage to the Magna Carta for MSME, it was killed basically after 10. It was like 10 years. It was killed because Banco Central, you remember, they started selling notes as a alternative compliance. After that, we worked very hard to be able to revise that, taking away those things. No? So the alternative compliance were taken away. Unfortunately, what we did not foresee is that the IRR will be made by the banks also. So at the end of the day, there is a small business one in DTI, which is controlled by the bankers, the central bank, the Department of Finance. We are able to take them away before the representation there with the BSP, Department of Finance, 3 representatives from the banking sector, the universal, the commercial, and the trip banks. So we were able to say, okay, what's central bank doing there? What's finance doing there? And the banks, then it's not supposed to be for them. So rotation is unrepresentative. It did not still work because the manner of reporting and the manner of, that does not work. So finally, at a desperation, because nothing really is coming in, we made a proposal. Let's think out of the bank. If you intend to get out the micro and small out of this quagmire, we are really serious.
Yes.
We have to invest in that. We cannot say no. So what was our proposal? We're giving away what 85 billion for CCT.
Mhm.
We proposed. If we are really serious, you devote 20% of that for lending. CCT walang balik yan. If you give it to ano, and what is the vehicle? We proposed under the Magna Carta for ano, that let us use SB Corporation, and we work with Bangko Sentral. They agreed finally that okay, if you will take away from the Magna Carta the provision which says it will be supervised by central bank, then they can formulate their own rules. And we said, oh, fine, because what we intend to do, if there is money given to SB Corporation and that they will not be supervised by Bangko Sentral, it can really come up with their own rules. The lending, the parameters will be, well, the success will not be to collect 95 or 97%. It will be simply how many jobs did you create?
Yeah.
How many jobs
So,
did you maintain?
limited
How
funds
many-
needs to be more
Yeah,
productive.
so
Productive. Yeah.
so it was going to. It was endorsed by the DTI. It was endorsed by, I think, finance to a certain degree. When it came to the hearing, I wasted a lot of time there. Then suddenly some bright one says, okay, why don't we just ask SSS, GSIS, Land Bank, DBP to contribute 500 million each? That's not gonna happen. They all, and that's too small. Anyway, we're saying, if you're serious, and I don't think the government is really serious in trying to address it, except coming up with a program that does not like what Mr. Yuriko said. We are supposed to have a program of lending to these. They still do not qualify under the rules. So what are
That's
we-
why, June, business is the partner, right? Partner of government to help government out.
Yes, yes.
That's why we're here.
So a small investment and we can empower our SMEs.
Yes.
It can probably be the backbone of our industry.
That's
If we
correct.
really just are serious in helping them.
Yes. All right. So, gentlemen, we are running out of time a little bit. So the last two questions for everyone, from your point of view, what changes are here to stay from your point of view, and what is the impact that you want to see? Let's start with you, Ed. What changes are here to stay?
Oh, well, I believe the shift to digital is here to stay. In all aspects of life, whether it's e-commerce, education, and that is positive. That has been a trend. It has just been perhaps the crisis has actually fast-tracked the adoption of digital, and so that's good. And the next question, Beth, is what
What's the impact that you want to see
impact of what
of
this
your
digital?
of your proposals?
Oh, well, well, first, before discussing impact, we'd like to see them considered seriously and implemented, and serious money put behind it, because we have so many programs, even Create, for instance, has not been signed. And after the signing by the president, there is the IRR. So the sense of urgency does not appear to be there for those that are very important. So I'm hoping that this crisis provides that sense of urgency. As I said, our country, our government normally responds to crisis. If there is no crisis, we're quite slow. If there's a crisis, normally they respond fast. But we still have not seen as much of that. There's a lot of work going on, but the results are not showing. So,
We need to,
Sorry,
we
I
need to
cannot.
speak louder. Yeah. Ed.
I'm thinking of something more diplomatic, but
I know, but we can all read your mind. Gigi,
okay.
Gigi.
Yeah, well, I echo digitalization, work from home, intended impact, I think for us, less traffic. And really, even for the international trips, it may not be so necessary to travel everywhere to get things done. No? Zoom is the best example of all of that. No, on the broader basis, hopefully we do get vaccinated, and then the economy returns, and obviously the impact. I think this year is also dead. So hopefully maybe next year. No? And then what we're trying to do at the MAP is just making sure that everybody gets educated and informed as much as we can, so that people become a little bit more informed in whatever areas of interest they like.
So keeping our head above water, actually, for this year as well.
Yes.
Yes. So Ambassador Yuhiko?
Oh, okay. What is here to stay? Well, we should learn not or never to be complacent, because, out of the blue, something like COVID-19 will happen. I think that is in our mindset now. That's gonna stay. And what do we do going forward? We have to learn how to innovate. That is the way out of this problem. Innovate. That's it.
June? June is on the phone. June? From your point of view, what changes are here to stay?
Sorry, I actually is in another webinar. So anyway, what was the question?
What changes are here to stay?
Well, I guess I agree with the changes in the fifth industrial revolution is something that has to stay, and I think the things that we're doing, our area of our effort in, and I think what is going to stay, the bad side, the small ones. With the small ones, we let to still get money.
Sorry?
The small SME will still get their money. Unless the government really decides that it is worth investing into.
Yeah. Has the relationship changed for the better between employers?
Well, relationship is always good. I mean, we have nothing against the bank here. We're just saying, because the bank has to be a bank, they have to protect themselves. That is why you have it to be outside of the box. That's why you're proposing the government must invest in it, because you cannot expect the banks to substandard loans. Anyway, the government is giving away money for free with results that we don't even know what will happen on the CCT. Why not devote half of it to lending, which will create jobs? You don't have to give CCT to these families, which we can do. And yet it will create jobs, permanent jobs. It will take away the mendicancy situation in the country. Why not do it? What's the difference? The only thing that I can see there is political. So it has got to change the mindset. We have to change the mindset, and that will stay, I think, unless something comes from the top which says we really have to address. We're left behind. Our SMEs are left behind in Asia, anywhere, because of the dire need for, because they're underbanked.
So I think with the theme for today's forum of shared prosperity, that really is the key. And as Gigi says, we need to stay cool, especially when there's other things that's going around us politically. We need to stay focused, we need to stay positive, and then think of the opportunity instead of the negatives during this time that we have while we're going through this devastating pandemic, and as the scientists say, also, this will not be the last one that we're going to face. So we're now going to be moving forward, I think, Paco, to the closing remarks.
That's right, Beth.
All right, may I introduce Mr. Zobel. He is the chairman and CEO of the Ayala Corporation, one of the largest and most diversified business groups in the Philippines and in Southeast Asia. Mr. Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala will be giving us the closing remarks. You have the floor.
Yep. Thanks very much, Elizabeth. And just a quick hello to all my friends leading this discussion. Of course, Ambassador Albert, Ernie Bauer, who I have not seen for a little while. Ambassador Yuico, it's very good to see you again. Mr. Sergio Ortiz Luis, Gigi, Ed, Dindo. Thank you. Thanks for the provoking discussion today. Perhaps even more importantly, thank you all for the work that you do. As leaders of your own individual companies, as leaders of key business associations, groups in the Philippines, to demonstrate the impact of the private sector as a reliable and in many ways irreplaceable pillar in nation building. It's always a pleasure to listen to you all. Even before the COVID-19 pandemic struck, member companies of the Philippine business groups represented here today, and of course the Ayala Group, very much a part of it, we're already working on programs around the evolving, expanded role of private institutions in society. And that expanded role is to help address the pain points of the community at large and the nation, even not just of our shareholders, to be more inclusive in purpose than the singular focus of just profit that Milton Friedman espoused a little more than 50 years ago. No? This pandemic has even made it more urgent and important for us to be inclusive in our survival and recovery efforts. This pandemic has been most democratic, sparing no one, but its effects have been much more devastating on society's already vulnerable segments than on larger, more buffered and diversified entities like ours. I firmly believe that our sustainable recovery as private institutions can only happen if the communities that support us and host us also survive and also thrive. They need us now more than ever to share in their adversity. And it cuts both ways. We also need them, the entire ecosystem that surrounds us, to recover and thrive so as to ensure our sustainable prosperity. So looking back over the last 12 months, I dare say that the private sector collectively stepped up and did more than our fair share in addressing this adversity and supporting the communities at large. I think, as pointed out by Professor Dindo earlier, it's gratifying that in a nationwide survey last September 2020, 85% of the Filipinos polled agreed that the private sector is a key and necessary partner of the government in national recovery, up from 72% a year earlier. The private sector, I believe, acted swiftly, dug deep, and used our balance sheets in order to protect our employees' financial and physical well-being. We pivoted our businesses to stay afloat so we could extend payrolls and preserve jobs, knowing that our employees depended on us to feed their families and afford other expenses, hopefully not medical. We supported our customers so they too could stay afloat and in turn extend similar help to their own set of customers. I think Ambassador Yuico pointed out the importance of employment in this whole process in helping the country move forward. The private sector also went outside our employee and business circles. In Project Ugnayam, 270 private companies came together and quickly raised donations to provide food for 14 million economically vulnerable individuals in the greater Metro Manila area. Other than peer partnerships, we also partnered with the government to help build pandemic facilities and donate supplies to frontliners. We took bold business-led actions to solve multiple pain points and not just the economic ones. At present, the top priority that the public and private sectors are working on is the safe, scaled, and swift rollout of the country's COVID-19 vaccination program. The challenge is quite massive and, of course, quite unprecedented. As a country, we will need to reach up to 300,000 vaccinations per day. Some say even 500,000 vaccinations per day if we are to achieve our target of herd immunity late this year. As before, Several companies are contributing their financial resources, their contacts, their networks, intellectual capital, and logistics assets to help our government in planning and executing an end-to-end vaccination roadmap. This includes help procuring large quantities of vaccines from reputable suppliers, logistics from port to warehouse to vaccination sites, administering the doses, and of course, monitoring the results. With all these examples, from financial amelioration programs to testing and treatment facilities to vaccine procurement and donations, several international experts have cited the degree of the Philippine private sector's contribution and partnership with the government as globally quite unique and unprecedented in scale. And it is also worth sustaining, it is worth strengthening it, and perhaps even sharing with other nations as a model for nation building. We anticipate that this private sector contribution through individual firms, private with private partnerships or private-public partnerships will continue well into the post-COVID times, particularly in figuring out how to rebuild and recover. The strengths of the private sector, its resources, ingenuity, energy, and performance management discipline are absolutely crucial to augment the government's massive machinery and even co-develop new ways to deliver critical aid and other forms of support to our stakeholders. In closing, I guess I will leave us with a challenge, and that is to build on this strong base and further magnify our private sector efforts by leveraging the membership body and platform of each of our Philippine business groups and Philippine business associations. What more can we do? Certainly as individual firms, and sometimes as part of special purpose coalitions like Project Ugnayan, we have already been engines of growth and social contributors. And some of us may think we have already pushed our limits. But how can we all do more? Without necessarily spending more than our already stretched limits, what synergies can we and should we pursue? For example, as members of these Philippine business groups, BU, PCCI, ECOP, MAP, MBC, can we force multiplier individual companies' impact by aligning with a strategic initiative of the Philippine business groups to which we belong? I think Ed, Ambassador Yuiko, Gigi, Mr. Sergio Ortiz-Luis, they talked about education, agriculture, financial inclusion. There are many other topics that we could all rally around jointly, I believe. As leaders of the Philippine business groups or associations, how may we tap and organize our membership to generate and demonstrate a collective impact that is more than the sum of the individual parts? To get liftoff, what one meaningful initiative can we start with that the members of my business association can boldly rally around, likely within our area of shared interest or domain expertise? For example, we may think of common, measurable commitments around manufacturing competitiveness for the Philippines, support for MSMEs, digital enablement, data security, entrepreneurship, hunger, poverty alleviation, education, job creation, and as was mentioned, agriculture, financial inclusion. I mean, the needs really are many, and likely each of us is already doing something about these many strands. But by combining our efforts, working hand in hand together, we may unleash more impact. And I think these words really echo many of the suggestions made earlier by all the speakers. But I do believe that the private sector is a force for growth and a force for good. And if we continue to put our collective resources and determination to task, we'll be able to force multiply the growth and the good that we can do in nation building. And I think this pandemic year has shown us more than ever that if we all act in unison, work together, join forces, and focus on some key areas where we can all make a difference, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that the private sector can be a massive generator of goodwill in our country and a solution to many of our problems. Again, thank you to all the speakers. It's always a pleasure to listen to all of you. To Dindo and Ambassador Albert, thank you for this invitation. Elizabeth, you always do such a good job herding us all. Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you, Mr. Zabel. And yes, force multiplier. The business groups can be a real force multiplier to work together towards shared prosperity. Thank you so much. Paco, is there something else? Dindo?
No, unless Professor Manhit, who's on mute.
Dindo, you're on mute.
Just want to use this opportunity to thank everyone, our speakers, Of course, closing remarks from Jaime. Thank you. Ambassador Ruico, always thank you for your continuing support. With June Ortiz-Luis from ECOP. Of course, Ed Chua for MBC and Gigi Botella for MAP, and nearly 200 participants and media, both, as I've said earlier, foreign and local news outlets. Thank you for everyone. We hope that this is just a start, that as we convene, as we talk, it can really build on an agenda of how we can recover as one nation collectively. Thank you, and we're so happy to have all of you in this business virtual roundtable. Good morning again. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beth, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, June.